Hello there, thank you for staying with us and welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I'm Victor Matthias. Now, it's over 2 months since the federal government announced the indefinite suspension of the operations of microblogging site Twitter in the country. Now, this was followed by outcry, outrage, threats of lawsuits, and even statements from 5 foreign missions in Nigeria strongly condemning the suspension. However, despite the ban, Nigerians have turned to the use of VPN or virtual private networks to circumvent the system, but businesses have found that not too good for business. Today on the program, we will be looking at how people and businesses have been faring since the ban came into effect. The NetBlock's cost of shutdown tool estimates the economic impact of an internet disruption, mobile data blackout, or app restriction in the nation using indicators from the World Bank, International Telecommunication Union, Eurostat, and U.S. Census, and it says Nigerian businesses may have lost almost $400 million since the federal government's ban on Twitter took effect in the country on June the 5th. But joining us to look at today's topic, we have with us in the Lagos studio Israel Oluyomi Babatunde. He is a creative strategist whose core expertise is art direction, but also enjoys writing copy and developing strategy. He is currently the Deputy Creative Director at TBWA Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you on the program today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course.
Victor.
Of course. We also have with us Chiamaka Akuba. She is a market research, business development, public relations, and content development expert. She currently leads the marketing and communications department at Summitech Computing Limited. She joins us via Zoom from Lagos, Nigeria, of course. Thanks for coming on the show today, Chiamaka.
Thank you for having me, Victor.
Indeed.
Good afternoon.
Of course, good afternoon. So kickstart the conversation for us, like they say, ladies first, all the time. So it's been a lot of water that has gone on the bridge since June the 5th when this ban, took effect in Nigeria. What has been the losses? I mean, I just ran through some of the figures that have been given, but it seems everyone is just, has adapted to the new normal, which is the use of VPN. But what are the downsides that you have seen so far?
Okay, thank you very much, Victor. Since June, there has been losses, like you have stated. However, for companies and particularly internal communications team, we start counting our losses from the area of customer service and dispute resolution. So we can't actually do that now because of the ban, save for companies with offices outside of the country, like ours, that has actually taken our Twitter operations to those countries where we have other branches. However, we still cannot do adverts. We can't do Twitter campaigns. We can't just drive conversations on Twitter. And for us as internal communications people, we have had to repurpose our budgets or strike out our Twitter budgets completely. We also have had to rethink impact because the impact that we can get from the use of Twitter cannot be replicated on another social media platform. We have also had to rethink our reach because if you want to attract young people to your brand, then you have to use Twitter. And there is no other platform so far that can replicate that reach for us. Yes.
Speaking about, attracting the young people and using Twitter, of course, there are other social media apps. I mean, you have tons of others. Why is it different? Why is Twitter's looking like the almighty one that, is attracting the attention of everybody?
Well, Twitter is very exciting, especially for young people. You get response in real time. You get feelings in real time. And that's not to say for other social media platforms like Instagram, which is heavy on video and pictures, or Facebook, which is heavy on pictures. And we should also consider that a lot of young people have moved away from using Facebook especially to Instagram and Twitter. Also, the viral factor on Twitter is very prevalent. Everyone wants to be viral. Young people want to be viral. They want to be heard immediately. And so that's why, Twitter is king.
Well, let's hold you there for a bit and come to the studio where we have Israel with us. She just said Twitter is king, but which is pretty much, I think, an acceptable fact by most people, going by analytics, numbers of people who use it, compared to the other apps. But so she talked more about businesses. Now let's look at individuals. What is the downside for individuals, especially creatives, or influencers? What is the downside for them?
Thank you very much. She's very spot on saying that Twitter is king because actually Twitter is king. I would like to refer back to an artist, more like, and that's Mayoko. Mayoko was actually discovered on Twitter by Davido. And you can believe, you can agree with me today that he's doing very well and is doing for himself very well and also for his family and his passion. What if there was no Twitter when Davido needed him? So creatives particularly have been so much doing well on Twitter before now, in the sense that we have people that have not even read the four walls of any offices and they are making so much money. So if when we are saying that Nigeria is losing like $250,000 per day, I think people, or let me say the so-called people behind this decision, don't really understand because they just phantom why is it that? It's because Twitter has been able to link Nigeria to the global economy itself in terms of the digital space.
In a lightning fast manner.
Yeah. So we are no longer talking about the fact that the money we are making only in Nigeria. We are talking about there is now a link between us and people in New York and people in the USA that can do a lot of businesses with. And I was privy to see some of the document that a brand like Mercedes has done, a brand like Burger King has done, and talking with some of their representatives in the global level. And you could see evidently that there are a lot of campaigns that are being run without even going to the traditional media. And they have so much success, and even the company is excited. So in this part of the world, we are still doing a bit of traditional and non-traditional. But we have so much we can do, and which is kind of so sad because we are already getting there before something like this happens. So as creatives, as business owners, this is one of the hardest decisions ever put on them.
All right. So, I mean, like I said, you even reiterated that fact, of how much is being lost on an hourly basis, based on the ban. Is your money part of that money that is being lost?
Of course. Of course. Yeah, as creative and also as in advertising, one of the things we've learned over time is to improvise. Yeah, we are improvising to make sure we don't lose that money for businesses and for the country as a whole. However, some businesses, even we know of some shows that have been running on Twitter successfully for the past few years, and now having to go to other media platforms like Facebook is more like having to start all over again. So it's not like we are not adjusting, sort of, but it's not actually necessary for us to be adjusting.
All right. So one of the things also that people are looking at, is the effectiveness of these platforms. It might be king, as you have said, and she has also said, and I think a lot of people kind of agree with you. But I mean, why aren't campaigns so effective, on other platforms? Why is it that it has to be Twitter? Why the over dependence? Like they say, life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. So why are we having this over dependence on Twitter?
Okay, you remember many years ago when Facebook came on board into this country, some of us joined it as like freshers. It was like the first launch for many Nigerians to go into the social media space. And what we're doing there was to show our birthdays, the new cars we bought. But business-wise, it was a bit kind of late for Facebook to open that opportunity for businesses before they started saying you can have your pages, you can have your advertising pages and do a lot of things. But Twitter came and changed the narrative, especially for the youth. Like we have a platform that we can say a lot and also check the government. It's a platform that you drop something, you get your audience. And the mechanics of how Twitter works is not completely, but is a lot better than the other media. Imagine Instagram, for example. Instagram came on board to say, just post your pictures and get people to like it. That was not the approach of Twitter. So I post my picture, I get people to like it. I can do ads on Instagram, yeah. I can do quite a lot on Instagram as well. But you agree with me that Twitter beat Instagram to it in terms of conversation, in terms of reaching the youth, especially.
All right, let me bring back Mamaka into the conversation. Mamaka, Israel is bringing another dimension, to the whole conversation now, talking about using the platform to check, the government, or maybe call someone to order, or even drive conversations. You made mention of that earlier on. But in your estimation, do you think that has stopped, looking at the fact that VPN, is still in place, and I mean, people are still out there on the platform making use of the app? I mean, what has really changed apart from the fact that VPN is in use?
Well, I would say that not much has changed. I would agree with the assumption that not much has changed, because there is still a lot of people using the platform with VPNs, even though it's not it's unlawful. And there are still more people who will be joining, the VPN users to use the VPNs. So in terms of, activism, I don't think that has reduced. If not for anything, it has, increased. And it's just a reflection, of a clear trend of the government making attempts to heavily regulate, sectors that are central to the country's digital economy. Tech is contributing more than 10% of the nation's, GDP, and currently it hasn't really affected. I wouldn't say so.
All right, the safety of the VPN has also been brought to question. Has there been any story or any report that you have heard of or might have heard of, of where someone's data or perhaps personal PINs or bank accounts, has been breached as a result of the use of VPN?
No, none so far. None so far. The use of VPN it's been really safe for people, but people have to be careful of the type of VPNs that they download onto their phones. Using VPN doesn't require you to put in your bank details, especially for the free ones, except for those that you want to pay for. So it doesn't require you putting your bank details, your address, nothing like that. So it's been relatively safe so far. Not heard anything from anyone, complaining about a breach in security at all.
All right. So, I mean, in your own, how would I put it, on your own experience, the VPN, now, like she said, the VPN, she hasn't heard stories, anywhere. But I mean, the threats are there. Cybersecurity threats are there. Using VPNs, using free Wi-Fi's, people are strongly advised, protect yourself and all of that. So, you may have not heard of any story, but the threats might be there. So, should in case, I mean, just for the safety of, the safety of being safe, I mean, what should people be doing?
Yeah, there's tendency for threats and for phones to be hacked. There is tendency. But VPN itself, it's a platform or an application or a forum or a digital space that was created to actually protect users. Like, so if you want to go to some places, you don't want to be tracked, you don't want to somebody, because we leave footprints everywhere online.
Digital footprints.
Digital footprints. That is why VPN was created. So before it can become a threat, it has to first serve its purpose, except if it was installed or created by an hacker himself. So I would say, for now, I've not been hearing, and I don't think it's a threat, but maybe objectively, or let me say alternatively, we just rely on what the government says and don't use Twitter.
And don't use Twitter at all. Let's hold your thoughts for a bit. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back to continue the conversation. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We'll still have with us our panelists in the studio as well as via Zoom. Just before we went on break, we talked about how the VPN issue, the safety of people online and all of that. But Israel, let's look at the way forward now. I mean, we've heard of the court cases, that have been instituted, even as far as the ECOWAS court. And all of that has been playing out. I understand also PI as well as EIE are planning now to sue the telcos. Do you think this will bring us to, the El Dorado that we're all looking for?
It's so sad that it has to come to this, that so many bodies have to be involved in such a little matter that is not supposed to be in the first place. However, I think we will need all these bodies for the federal government to actually understand the implication of what they are doing. And the way forward is I will actually urge every creative, everybody out there to support the motion for it to be back, for Twitter to be back online, because it's for the good of everybody.
Yeah. All right, Amaka, Chair Amaka, let me look at there was a committee, or there was a number of people that, were raised by the federal government to go and have a talk with the executives at Twitter. Has there been any outcome or any, maybe from the grapevine now, any headway in that meeting?
Well, I'm not privy to that conversation, so I wouldn't say anything about that. However, I feel like if the government is, making efforts to make sure that we have Twitter back, the best thing that we can do is to wait and just see the resolution from both parties, because both parties have to come to the table, they have to have a conversation, and, agreement has to be reached on both sides. However, we look at it, Nigeria is a government, is a sovereign entity, and however angry or uncomfortable we are with the ban, it's our country, and we have to try as much as possible to see how we can support our government, our government initiatives also. So if they're able to come to the table and have a conversation and decide whether or not to open up Twitter again, would be, happier for it. But we don't want to overlook the impacts, that the ban is currently having, on the economy, also for the tech space in which I work in, difficulty in accessing funding and all that. So yeah, it has happened with cryptocurrency. Now we are seeing the government trying to bring out, its personal type of, e-currency, or however they put it, but we're just trying to see and hope that the conversations that are being held now results to, a positive resolution for all parties involved.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you be expecting? I mean, of course, apart from the positives, what do you think might be the demands, so to speak, now of the government and even of Twitter themselves?
I think the government could be calling for. I'm in no position to speak for the government, but I would, if I were a part of the committee, I would probably ask for better regulation, also identity, because we have seen, like a rise in trolls and fake accounts, and also fraud on social media in general, not just Twitter. So I'll be calling for, more in terms of identity. Yeah.
All right, Chair Amaka Kuba, I'd have to say thank you for joining us today on the program and sharing your thoughts. It's a continuing conversation, of course, and of course, maybe sometime in the future we'll have you back to see where things have gone in terms of the conversation between Twitter and the federal government, and also how things are shaping up in this space. Thanks again for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course, you're welcome. So, I mean, as we wind down now, speaking of identity, because if I want to understand what she means by identity now, it's, maybe those who have accounts that, don't necessarily are their real personalities. So, for instance, say you want to launch a Twitter account and you launch it as Snowball or something, just something, but your name is Israel, but your Twitter account says Snowball, so there's going to be like a difficult way to link that account to you. But one of the things, or one of the agreements that you sign onto when you're logging onto these accounts, is that they have made it like clear that they're not going to share your identity, or maybe your IP, your prints, and all of that. I mean, if we have that conflict of interest, say the government is asking for stuff like that, and then Twitter is saying, no, our terms of conditions, our terms of agreements, our terms of service do not allow us to make these details available to you. How do you think that kind of a quagmire can be solved or that bridge can be crossed?
I believe there's always a middle ground for everything. In US, after the Donald Trump elections and everything that happened, there were issues with the likes of Facebook and the Twitter and the likes, and they were able to find a middle ground somehow at the end of the day, and it's still ongoing conversation. So I believe that this issue of fraud and the likes is not only limited to the internet. Of course, there are people that actually defraud people without necessarily knowing their account. And as that's why, as Nigerians, also we have to be vigilant there. And in all fairness, there are a lot of things that have been done on Twitter over time to prune all these fraudulent activities. So if we can find a middle ground, I believe there will be a way forward. Because Twitter has these policies, and we have to believe that they are not only running in Nigeria, and it has to be respected.
Well, let's hope that that respect is given to both parties, both the governments, the establishment itself, and also those who use the platform. I mean, that respect should go all around. But I have to say thank you as well, Israel, for joining us today on the program and sharing your thoughts. Again, it's a continuing conversation, and we'll keep having it until we have a middle ground, like you said, and everyone is happy, so to speak. But thanks again for joining us on the program and sharing your thoughts.